Now, I've had some of the younger ones call me and ask me about taking drugs to get their experiences, their mystic experiences, because the chosen Pied Pipers, again, the big boys who were put out there, are advocating drugs to get your shamanistic experience and to meet the all, you know. And it's so interesting that they've done this every so often down through history, and the present generation never saw the mayhem of the 1960s and 70s, or the suicides, or those who died vomiting up stuff as they were going through withdrawals from heroin, and people who drove cars into brick walls when they were chewing magic mushrooms and seeing Walt Disney climb along the walls, cartoon figures. These drugs do not give you a true experience. And I know people today who went through it all and who were convinced that they had mystical experiences. And yet, the same people have had so many dreams, all conjured up from the unconscious, the sea of the unconscious, where anything is possible, and have had parts of their brain stimulated by specifically designed drugs, again by the big boys, and are convinced that they had a real experience. Well, that's fine for them, but they haven't, because I've spoken to many of them, and they're no wiser today as they were when they were 18. Never mind the side effects of the drugs. I knew people who walked out of third-floor apartment windows, who walked into the air and went down on drugs, promoted from the top downwards. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, LSD, Lucy, the light bringer again, you see, was promoted by the British government. Limos used to throw bags of LSD over university walls at the beginning to get the rage started, to make it a fad and a rage, you see. And they brought the pop guys on who were stoned out their heads onto television. And this is the BBC, the most conservative, Etonian-type programming in the planet. Everybody at that time was recruited to work in the BBC from Eton. That was mandatory. So that the upper middle classes kept a hold of everything, the culture creation. But they'd interview these guys who were stoned and could hardly put a sentence together. And then the interviewer would say, oh, how naughty are we? We're terribly naughty. This is to encourage the young. Then they brought out Timothy Leary, Dr. Timothy Leary, with his white coat. The scientists, again, were trained to listen to experts who went round stages and universities wearing his white coat, talking as an expert, telling us about the wonders of drugs. And now it's declassified from the CIA. He worked for the CIA. So here's the CIA promoting hallucinogenic drugs. Quite the world we live in. Well, the New Agers are recycling the same stuff, that you got to get your experience through drugs. And drugs have been used by the big Brahmins in India for thousands of years to control the people there. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And when you're having your fantastic experience and seeing jolly green giants walking around, you're also having something done to specific parts of your brain. Because these drugs are all modified, heavily, heavily modified drugs, even the plant ones. Victor Rothschild of the banking family in the 1940s worked at Porton Downs, bacterial and viral warfare facility. And he also was in charge of an experimentation group to using LSD on selected people. They even used it on members of MI5. And Peter Wright wrote about that. He was in MI5 and attached to MI6. And he writes about Lord Rothschild advocating these experiments. So they were testing it out long before they gave it to the teeny boppers to blow their minds and control them. When you go through the LSD experiences, especially in a habitual way, you'll find it hard to tell what's real, what is not real. You also have flashbacks. These flashbacks can last the rest of your life, where you're walking along the road and suddenly you're hallucinating again because part of the brain was damaged. The drugs are meant to go to specific receptors within the brain, and they damage them. Yet here are the gurus of the New Age, and it's all over, and it's amazing how the New Agers gobble. They're the best consumers of religion out there. They're better than any other religion today because it's been made to be so through heavy promotion and financing. And they don't even question how these books all get out there so cheaply and stack the shelves with guru this and guru that, advocating this and that kind of drug. But that's the present craze right now, is drugs for your mystical experience. It never occurs to them, because they're not individuals. It never occurs to them that there could be any other way. Never does. They want the easy, fast way, a chemical way. the chemical way. Eh? Here's the money, give me the experience. They have no knowledge of the topics. They only have an exoteric and very superficial exoteric understanding of that which they think they're involved in or they believe in. And yet they are the modern ones with the drive-through mentality, drive-through coffee, drive-through donuts, drive-through give me the experience. Here's the money, give me the experience. No patience. It's fascinating to see how this has all been created for them and how they have fallen so easily for it with their own vocabulary, which they didn't invent. The big boys that gave them the whole culture invented that for them. It's fascinating to watch it all being played out again and promoted. And because the gurus who lead them are put out there as fronts, and who they themselves are only partly trained in the exoteric, they must lead them in the same path always, because they can't go any further. They don't have the knowledge or the abilities, so they advocate drugs. We jump back to a coincidence, many coincidences. Here's one book, was Charles Galton Darwin talking about ways to control the public in the 1950s, advocating possibly the use of hormones and so on in the food to make the men more, weaker and more effeminate, less aggressive or less able to stand up for rights, etc. But also he advocated different kinds of drugs to calm them all down or confuse them. Didn't matter which, as long as he put them out of action. And others wrote about that too. The big players wrote about it. And here it is being pushed again. And with another generation growing up in ignorance, as always, because they always hide knowledge of the previous. So they can play the same games over and over with every generation. That's why generally they have wars at least 20 years apart. That's another crop growing up, you see, of young people who are totally ignorant of the last war. This is all science we run by. Everything is a routine of science. So no, I don't personally advocate the use of drugs to gain some mystical experience. And again, too, you'll never ever be able to be certain, because you knew you took the drug, if it was real or not. You can tell by studies that have been done over hundreds of years there's a good chance it definitely was not. Your unconscious can conjure up any kind of dream, fantasy, or nightmare. And these drugs are specifically designed to stimulate the limbic system. They're perfected, you might say. So whatever you do in that realm, you do so at your own peril. It's a sad thing to see that when the greatest gift anyone is given is the ability to be completely conscious. And it's understandable with the crisis creation, to create uncertainty, confusion, and fear, that people are unable to handle their conscious mind, so they turn to something to escape. Again, it's all a technique. But when you see such a war being played on your conscious mind, that should be your cue to, rather than throw away your ability to be conscious, fight to keep it, fight to retain your conscious mind, your ability to go further. Don't be afraid of all the hype they throw your way, and impending gloom, doom, and horror and crisis after crisis. That's the technique to wear you down. It's the technique to control you. And another thing I've said over and over is that the big, well-funded people who come out, either pretending to lead you through the New Age, did not get there by chance. And the other ones who go into the political side of things, and that's their chant, is to wrap you back into politics again and terrify you with all impending things that are going to happen to you. Well, see, psychological warfare doesn't care who gives that to you, that information, whether it's a guy in government or a person who pretends to speak for you. The whole idea is to paralyze you with fear so that you're not thinking critically and rationally. So be careful. You are the guardian of your own mind. No one else is. And within those walls that protect your mind, you have sacred ground. Sacred ground. Be careful who you allow to walk upon it.